Okay, let's just get right into it. You've heard the old saying, right? Money can't buy happiness? Well, maybe not. But guess what? It absolutely buys life. And not just a little bit of life, a lot of it. Today's explainer is breaking down a massive 50-year study on human longevity. The link between your bank account and your heartbeat, it's honestly terrifying. We're about to bust wide open some major myths you probably believe. Let's face your darkest, most cynical assumption head on. Deep down, you probably suspect the wealthy live longer. They have the best doctors, right? Less daily stress, personal trainers. But is that just a gut feeling, or is it cold, hard mathematical certainty? Does a bigger paycheck literally buy you extra years on this earth? The brutal reality? Yes, it does. Look at this. Men in the top 5% of earners, they live exactly 8 years longer than guys in the bottom 5%. 8 whole years. That's not a margin of error. That's an entire childhood. That's the literal difference between meeting your grandkids and passing away before they're even born. And for women, the gap is still huge, sitting at almost 4 extra years. So, how do we know this for sure? Let's move into section 1, decoding 50 years of data. The researchers here didn't just guess. They didn't hand out a flimsy survey to a couple hundred people. Look at the absolute scale of this. 11 million Canadians, tracked for half a century, from 1966 all the way to 2015. They locked in average earnings when people were in their late 40s. Then, they basically just watched the clock. This isn't some academic theory. It's a massive 50-year ledger of life and death. And this brilliantly shows the relentless math of survival. See that upward slope? Across the bottom is your earnings. Up the side is your chance of making it to age 75. It's literally a straight line up. More money, more life, period. Zero exceptions. It's as simple and brutal as that. Now, a lot of people assume there's a limit to this, a hardship threshold. The myth goes like this. Poverty hurts your health, sure, but once you can afford basic food and a roof over your head, the survival differences just flatten out, right? Wrong. Completely wrong. The data completely shatters that idea. There is no magical threshold. A top earner simply has a 25% greater chance of hitting 75 than a low earner. Every single extra dollar you make, it just keeps extending your timeline. But wait, it gets crazier. Section 2, the Great Canadian Twist. So, based on that grim math, you'd totally expect the rich to just keep pulling further and further ahead, right? Well, get ready for a total face slap to our global assumptions. Look at this comparison of life expectancy gains over a few decades. On the left is the United States. The rich gained a massive amount of extra time. The poor? They gained absolutely nothing, flatline. But look over on the right. Look at Canada. These numbers are absolutely staggering. While the poorest Americans gained exactly 0 extra years of life over those decades, the poorest Canadians gained up to 5 extra years. Let that sink in. The poorest folks in Canada gained just as much extra lifespan as the absolute richest. Canada experienced a perfectly uniform shift. Everyone, the whole society, moved forward together. Unlike the US, where literally only the wealthy got more time, the Canadian data shows an entire population stepping up in unison. Sure, the gap between the rich and poor stayed the same, but the rising tide actually lifted all boats. Everyone got more time. But before we start throwing a parade for the perfect society, we need to hit section 3, the middle age crisis. The data throws out a terrifying warning sign for the future. Look really closely at that dark brown line right at the top. This tracks men born in the 1950s as they hit middle age. For decades, every single new generation survived middle age better than the guys before them. But suddenly, for this 1950s group, it slams straight into a brick wall. Progress just stops. Mortality improvements for middle-aged men have completely stalled out. The researchers literally call this a sudden cessation of survival improvements. It's incredibly alarming. This sudden stagnation really echoes that grim trend happening in the US right now. Deaths of despair, people dying from addiction, extreme stress, and economic displacement. Well, this data proves that dark wave, it's not just an American problem anymore. It's spreading. Of course, no study is perfect. Let's look at section 4, the blind spots. To be completely objective, we have to brutally critique this data. Yes, 11 million people is massive, but it hides a lot. It's based on tax records, right? So the researchers had absolutely no idea what race anyone was, no clue about their education levels. Spousal income? Totally ignored. And if you never earned a formal paycheck, you aren't even on this chart. So what does that mean? It means for marginalized groups, the real longevity gap is probably far, far worse than what we're even seeing here.
Which brings us to the ultimate question in Section 5. Why are we different?
If personal income alone doesn't explain why the poorest Canadians vastly outlive the poorest Americans, what's the actual secret? Let's break it down logically. Step 1. Rule out just having doctors. Having a doctor at the very end of your life doesn't fix a lifetime of poor health. Step 2. Rule out basic wages. Working class pay was actually pretty similar in both countries back then. So, Step 3. It's the invisible killer. Chronic stress. It's the daily relentless grinding wear and tear of hardship that slowly breaks a human body down over decades. And that leaves us with this final thought. Money buys time. That is an undeniable fact. But the stark contrast between these two countries proves something even bigger. It proves that your society's underlying structure dictates who gets left behind. If a stronger social safety net and simply having less chronic stress can literally buy millions of people an extra half-decade of life, we have to ask, what kind of society are we actually building? And really, what is a decade of your life actually worth?